had your grilled cheese.
Then you can't differ.
I can differ.
Just because you don't know doesn't mean you differ.
I don't think you can do it.
Having a debate of whether or not I can make grilled cheese.
The kind that aren't black on one side.
I won't blacken on
greasy on the other.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Stories from Your Gaffer. I'm Clint McElroy, and this is my wife currently, Carol McElroy. We are reading The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman, and we are up to Chapter 4, art by Dave McKean. And we're up to Chapter 4, so let's get with it.
The Witch's Headstone.
There was a witch buried at the edge of the graveyard. It was common knowledge. Bod had been told to keep away from that corner of the world by Mrs. Owens as far back as he could remember. Why? He asked.
"'Tain't healthy for a living body," said Mrs. Owens. "There's damp down that end of things. It's practically a marsh. You'll catch your death."
Mr. Owens himself was more evasive and less imaginative. "It's not a good place," was all he said. The graveyard proper ended at the bottom of the west side of the hill, beneath the old apple tree, with a fence of rust-brown iron railings, each topped with a small rusting spearhead. But there was a wasteland beyond that, a mass of nettles and weeds, brambles, and autumnal rubbish. And Bod, who was, on the whole, obedient, did not push between the railings, but he went down there and looked through. He knew he wasn't being told the whole story, and it irritated him.
Bod went back up the hill to the little chapel near the entrance to the graveyard, and he waited until it got dark. As twilight edged from gray to purple, there was a noise in the spire, like a fluttering of heavy velvet. And Silas left his resting place in the belfry and clambered head first down the spire.
"What's in the far corner of the graveyard?" asked Bod. "Past Harrison Westwood, baker of this parish, and his wives Marion and Joan."
"Why do you ask?" asked his guardian, brushing the dust from his black suit with ivory fingers.
Bod shrugged. "Just wondered."
"It's consecrated ground," said Silas. "Do you know what that means?"
"Not really," said Bod.
Silas walked across the path without disturbing a fallen leaf. He sat down on the bench beside Bod. "There are those," he said in a silken voice, "who believe that all land is sacred, and that it is sacred before we come to it, and sacred after. But here in your land, there are blessed churches, and the ground they set aside to bury people in and make it holy. But they left land unconsecrated beyond the sacred ground, potter's field, to bury the criminals and the suicides, or those who were not of the faith."
"So the people buried in the ground on the other side of the fence are bad people?"
Silas raised one perfect eyebrow. "Can't do it." "No, not at all. Let's see. It's been a while since I've been down that way. I don't remember anyone particularly evil. Remember, in days gone by, you could be hanged for stealing a shilling, and there's always people who find their lives have become so unsupportable they believe the best thing they could do would be to hasten their transition to another plane of existence."
"They kill themselves, you mean?" said Bod. He was about 8 years old, wide-eyed and inquisitive, and he was not stupid.
"Indeed."
"Does it work? Are they happier dead?"
"Sometimes. Mostly, no. It's like the people who will believe they'll be happy if they go and live with someone else, but who learn it doesn't work that way. Wherever you go, you take yourself with you, if you see what I mean."
"Sort of," said Bod.
Silas reached down and ruffled the boy's hair.
Bod said, "What about the witch?"
"Yes, exactly," said Silas. "Suicides, criminals, and witches. Those who died unshriven." He looked up at a midnight shadow in the twilight. "All this talking," he said, "and I have not even had my breakfast. While you will be late for lessons." In the twilight of the graveyard, there was a silent implosion, a flutter of velvet darkness. Silas was gone. The moon had begun to rise by the time Bod reached Mr. Pennyworth's mausoleum, and Thomas Pennyworth, here he dies in the certainty of the most glorious resurrection, was already waiting, and he was not in the best moods. "You're late," he said.
"Sorry, Mr. Pennyworth."
Pennyworth tutted. The previous week, Mr. Pennyworth had been teaching Bod about elements and humors and Bod had kept forgetting which was which. He was expecting a test, but instead Mrs. Pennyworth said, Mr. Pennyworth said, are we watching a show about Pennyworth?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Pennyworth said, I think it's time to spend a few days on practical matters. Time is passing, after all.
Is it? Said Bod.
I'm afraid so, young Master Owens. Now, how is your fading? Bod had hoped he would not ask that question.
It's all right, he said. I mean, you know.
No, Master Owens, I do not know. Why do you not demonstrate for me?
Bod's heart sunk. Oh, sorry, I cut you on.
Bod's heart sank. He took a deep breath and did his best, squinching up his eyes and trying to fade away. Mr. Pennyworth was not impressed. Pah! That's not the kind of thing. Not the kind of thing at all. Slipping and fading, boy, in the way of the dead. Slip through the shadows, fade from awareness. Try again. Bod tried harder. You're as plain as the nose on your face, said Mr. Pennyworth, and your nose is remarkably obvious, as is the rest of your face, young man, as are you. For the sake of all that is wholly, empty your mind now. You are an empty alleyway. You are a vacant doorway. You are nothing. Eyes will not see you. Minds will not hold you. You are where it is nothing and nobody. Bod tried again. He closed his eyes and imagined himself fading into the stained stonework of the mausoleum wall, becoming a shadow on the night and nothing more. He sneezed. Dreadful, said Mr. Pennyworth at the side. Quite dreadful. I believe I shall have a word with your guardian about this. He shook his head. So, the rumors are true.
No, try again.
So, oh gosh. So, the humors, I'll list them.
Sanguine, choleric, phlegmatic, and the other one, melancholic, I think. And so it went until it was time for grammar and composition with Miss Letitia Burrows, spinster of this parish, who did no harm to no man all the days of her life. Reader, can you say likewise? But Bod liked Miss Burrows and the coziness of her little crypt, and that she could all too easily be led off the subject. They say there's a witch in unconsecrated ground, he said.
Yes, dear, but you don't want to go over there.
Why not?
Miss Burrows smiled, and the guileless smile of the dead. They aren't our sort of people, she said.
But it is the graveyard, isn't it? I mean, I'm allowed to go there if I want to.
That, said Miss Burrows, would not be advisable. Bod was obedient but curious, and so when lessons were done for the night, he walked past Harrison Westwood, Baker, and the family's memorial, a broken-armed angel, but did not climb down the hill to Potter's Field. Instead, he walked up the side of the hill to where a picnic some 30 years before had left its mark in the shape of a large apple tree. There were some lessons that Bod had mastered. He had eaten a bellyful of unripe apples, sour and white, picked from the tree some years before. He had regretted it for days, his guts cramping and painful, while Mrs. Owens lectured him on what not to eat. Now, he always waited until the apples were ripe before eating them. He never ate more than 2 or 3 a night. He had finished the last of the apples last week before, but he liked the apple tree just as a place to think.
He edged up the trunk to his favorite place in the crook of 2 branches and looked down at the potter's field below him, a brambly patch of weeds and unmown grass in the moonlight. He wondered whether the witch would be old and iron-toothed and travel in a house on chicken legs, or whether she would be thin and sharp-nosed and carry a broomstick. Bod's stomach growled, and he realized he was getting hungry. He wished he had not devoured all the apples on the tree, that he had left just one.
He glanced up, and thought he saw something. He looked once, looked twice to be certain. An apple, red and ripe. Bod prided himself on his tree climbing skills. He swung himself up, branch by branch, and imagined he was Silas, swarming smoothly up a sheer brick wall. The apple, the red of it, almost black in the moonlight, hung just out of reach. Bod moved slowly forward along the branch until he was just below the apple. Then he stretched up, and the tips of his fingers touched the apple. He was never to taste it. A snap, louder than a hunter's gun, and the branch gave way beneath him.
A flash of pain woke him, sharp as ice, the color of slow thunder, down in the weeds that summer's night. The ground beneath him seemed relatively soft and oddly warm. He pushed a hand down and felt something like fur beneath him. He had landed on the grass pile where the graveyard's groundskeeper threw the cuttings from the mower, and it had broken his fall. Still, there was a pain in his chest, and his leg hurt as if he had landed on it first and twisted it. Bod moaned.
"Hush there, you boy, hush," said a voice from behind him. "Where'd you come from? Dropping like a thunderstone. What way is that to carry on?"
"I was in the apple tree," said Bod.
"Ah, let me see your leg. Broken like the tree's limb. I'll be bound." Cool fingers prodded his left leg. "Not broken. Twisted, yes. Sprained, perhaps. You have the devil's own luck, boy. Falling into the compost tain't the end of the world."
"Oh, good," said Bod. "Hurts, though." He turned his head, looked up and behind him. She was older than him, but not a grown-up, and she looked neither friendly nor unfriendly, wary mostly. She had a face that was intelligent and not even a little bit beautiful. "I'm Bod," he said.
"The live boy?" she asked. Bod nodded. "I thought you must be," she said. "We've heard of you, even over here in the potter's field. What do they call you?"
"Owens," he said. "Nobody Owens. Bod for short."
"What do you do, young Master Bod?" Bod looked her up and down. She wore a plain white shift. Her hair was mousy and long, and there was something of goblin in her face. A sideways hint of a smile that seemed to linger no matter what the rest of her face was doing.
"Were you a suicide?" he asked. "Did you steal a shilling?"
"Never stole nothing," she said. "Not even a handkerchief. Anyway," she said pertly, "the suicides is all over there on the other side of the hawthorn, and the gallows birds, they're in the blackberry patch, most of them. One was a coiner, t'other was a highwayman, or so he says, though if you ask me, I doubt he was more than a common footpad and a night walker."
"Ah," said Bod. And then suspicion forming, tentatively, he said, "They say a witch is buried here."
She nodded. "Drowned and buried here without as much as a stone to mark the spot."
"You were drowned and burned?"
She settled down on the hill of grass cuttings beside him, held his throbbing leg with her chilly hands. "They came to my little cottage at dawn, before I'm proper awake, and drags me out into the green. 'You're a witch!' they shouts. Fat and fresh scrubbed, all pink in the morning, like so many pig wiggins scrubbed clean for market day. One by one, they gets up beneath the sky and tells of milk gone sour, horses gone lame, and finally Mistress Jemima gets up, the fattest, pinkest, best scrubbed of them all, tells how a Solomon Porritt now cuts her dead, and instead hangs around the wash house like a wasp about a honey pot, and it's all my magic," she said. "That made him so, and the poor young man must be bespelled. So they strap me to the cucking stool, and forces it under the water of the duck pond, saying if I'm a witch, I'll neither drown nor care, but if I'm not a witch, I'll feel it." Now that doesn't make sense.
"No, but they used to do it."
Yeah, but and Mistress Jemima's father gives them each a silver groat to hold the stool down under the foul water for a long time to see if I'd choke on it.
And did you?"
"Oh, yes, got a lungful of water. It done for me."
"Oh," said Bod. "Then you weren't a witch after all?"
The girl fixed him with her beady ghost eyes and smiled a lopsided smile. She still looked like a goblin, but now she looked like a pretty goblin, and Bod didn't think she would have needed magic to attract Solomon Porritt, not with a smile like that. "What nonsense! Of course I was a witch. They learned that when they untied me from the cucking stool, and stretched me on the green, 9 parts dead and all covered with duckweed and stinking pond muck. I rolled my eyes back in my head and I cursed each and every one of them there on the village green that morning. None of them would ever rest easily in a grave. I was surprised how easily it came, the cursing. Like dancing it was, when your feet pick up the steps of a new measure your ears have never heard and your head don't know, and they dance till dawn. She stood and twirled and kicked, and her bare feet flashed in the moonlight. This is how I cursed them, with my last gurgling, pond-watery breath, and then I expired. They burned my body on the green till I was nothing but blackened charcoal, and they popped me in a hole in Potter's Field without as much as a headstone to mark my name. And it was only then that she paused, it seemed, for a moment, wistful.
Are any of them buried in the graveyard then? Asked Bond.
Not a one, said the girl with a twinkle. The Saturday after they drowned and toasted me, a carpet was delivered to Master Porringer all the way from London town, and it was fine carpet. But it turned out there was more in that carpet than strong wool and good weaving, for it carried the plague in its pattern. And by Monday, 5 of them were coughing blood, and their skins were gone as black as mine when they hauled me from the fire. A week later, it had taken most of the village, and they threw the bodies all promiscuous in a plague pit they dug outside of town. That they filled in after.
Was everyone in the village killed?
She shrugged. Everyone watched me get drowned. Everyone who watched me get drowned and burned. How's your leg now?
Better, he said. Thanks. Bod stood up slowly and limped from the grass pile. He leaned against the iron railings. So, were you always a witch? He asked. I mean, before you cursed them all?
As if it would take witchcraft, she said with a sniff, to get Solomon mooring around mooning. Dyslexic. Around my cottage, which, Bod thought, but did not say, was actual an answer to the question, not at all.
What's your name?
Got no headstone, she said, turning down the corners of her mouth. Might be anybody, mightn't I?
But you must have a name.
Liza Hempstock, if you please, she said tartly. And then she said, it's not that much to ask, is it? Something to mark my grave? Something down there, see, with nothing but nettles to show where I rest? She looked so sad for a moment that Bod wanted to hug her, and then it came to him as he squeezed between the railings of the fence. He would find Liza Hempstock a headstone with her name on it. He would make her smile.
He turned to wave goodbye as he began to clamber up the hill, but she was already gone. So there you have it.
So I have to get rid of my old lady voice for Liza Hempstock and go back to a youthful voice.
A Ute. Be like the Ute.
Be like the Ute. Oh!
I just stumbled across this picture. Carol made this happen. This is the saddest moments for pets.
What's he got on?
You dressed him up with like wristlets and a necklace. And,
it was Christmas.
And you put him all up in its poor Christmas get up, poor little guy.
Look at his little bracelets.
Oh, I still don't. I think
Homer.
I might have taken him and thrown him in the river after that. Not the dog, the bracelets. Little Homer sits like a human, a big fat human. Okay, so that's going to do it for this Sunday evening. Hope you are doing well. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow evening at 5:30. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy, and choose joy.